Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Angela Bernhard Thomas. I am the Chief Esports Officer at Collegiate Sports Management Group and EsportsU. Very excited to welcome this panel today here for the Commissioners Roundtable. Very privileged and honored to have you all here today. I think what we're seeing here is the OGs of college esports. So very much excited to hear all the different perspectives from the commissioners that we have on this panel today that have really built this space. So with that, let's get started with introductions. Take about 30 seconds. Let the audience know who you are and what conference you represent. And Carolayne, we'll start with you.
Sure, and hello everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Carolayne Henry. I am the Senior Associate Commissioner here at the Mountain West Conference. We're a traditional athletics conference, but we also have esports, and we're going into our 6th year of esports. So we're very excited about the upcoming season, and again, just really happy to be here.
Thank you. Dan?
Sure. Yeah. Dan Coonan, Commissioner of the ECAC, took this job 8 years ago. We had 250 traditional sport colleges, D1, 2, and 3. We decided then to jump into esports as it was just getting rolling. Emailed all 250 ADs and said who'd be interested if we jumped into esports. And then a couple of days, I had 24 responses saying yes, and we've just grown from then. Now we've got 11,000 competitors nationwide playing 17 games. So it's been pretty cool. So we're thrilled with the way it's gone, and appreciate Angela, you guys in CSMG, and everything you guys have done to help us.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. Michael?
Sure. I think I might be the one that's a little different. I don't have a commissioner in my title because my role is a little bit different, maybe a lot different, actually. But I'm Michael Brooks. I'm the executive director for the National Association of Collegiate Esports. It's the oldest, it's the largest varsity esports organization association in North America. And we have 215 varsity esport programs, institutions as member institutions. But we also run NACE Star League, which is the largest collegiate esports competition in North America, with last count was 700, and I checked it this morning. It was 776 colleges and universities of all makes, sizes, and types.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michael. Bob?
Yeah, hi, folks. Bob Dranoff, Commissioner of the East Coast Conference. Like Carolayne, we're a traditional NCAA conference. We're NCAA Division II. I'm starting my 16th year as Commissioner of the conference. We'll be starting our 5th year with esports this fall, and we're a lot smaller than Dan and Michael's organizations. We have about 14 schools that'll play with us this year. Excited to be part of this. Thank you, Angela.
Great. Small but mighty, Bob. Small but mighty. But yes, thank you all for being here. So we'll just get started. Dan, I'd like to start with you. And I've got a list of questions here that we're going to run through that the team has put together. And so the ECAC has operated in this space for so many years now. As you have seen booms in leagues and tournaments, what has been the one thing that you have identified that a league or a conference requires to sustain itself for this long?
Well, I'll answer it for us. There's a variety of folks on the call here, and I think we've all got a niche and have found what works for us. And in our case, I think to be sustainable, from the start, we realized that we wanted to have a diversity of games, and that if we got married to one or two games, people's interests and can be fleeting, and there can be a lot of change across this. And we thought, if we have a lot of games, we'll be able to sustain ourselves through some of the ebb and flow of people's taste. So we have 17 titles, and it's great to have competition across all 17 of those titles. So I think that would be the first thing, just having a diversity of games, so a school can join us and get involved in all of what we've got to offer. Secondly, I think just listening to our members and specifically listening to the competitors as well as the coaches. There has been a lot of change. I mean, 7 years ago, we had a vision, but we knew this thing was going to be a little crazy, and we knew enough to know that we didn't know how it was going to be, and so we just wanted to kind of build a beast and then listen to our competitors and listen to our member schools, and fill their needs and provide value for them in the way that they want us to. And so I think the combination of those two things has really been essential for us in our sustainability, and it continues to drive our success, I think.
That's great, Dan. Thank you so much. Question for Michael next. Michael, everyone knows about the partnership with Playfly and NACE Star League. Can you share with viewers who may not be aware, how do NACE and Playfly combine their forces to deliver the NACE Star League? Or a little bit about how that came about even. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I appreciate you bringing that up. So it really came down to right time, right place, and a marriage of goals. Back when, was this like 2 years ago now, when we were talking to Playfly, and we talked to every group pretty much in the collegiate esports space, some more than others just from the nature of our work. But what we identified pretty quickly is we had two different organizations dealing with two different populations within collegiate esports. NACE has always been focused on varsity official esport programs at our member institutions. Playfly Esports at that point in time, they were called Collegiate Star League, so they had a name change a little later on. But Collegiate Star League was historically known for club esports, right? These are not typically the official programs of these colleges and universities. These are student clubs organizing themselves and competing from their institutions, not necessarily on behalf of, but from those institutions. And we realized pretty quickly there's a lot of similarity in the work that we're doing, right? We're still putting on competition. We're still negotiating with publishers. We're still broadcasting. We're still putting together our own national championships or in-person grand finals. A lot of duplicate efforts, right, to accomplish the same thing. And then we looked at our strengths and weaknesses, and we saw that there was kind of a divergence there where what Playfly was really focused on was, how do we make this commercially viable and a sustainable business model to grow in the future? And on our part, that was never in our wheelhouse or really an objective we're looking at. Like, sustainability is important, don't get me wrong. We were obviously very focused on that as well, but we're really focused on the level setting of the space, right? How do we put down the infrastructure, the concrete, the foundation, the building blocks to make sure that this can grow in a reasonable way that fits within the collegiate ecosystem, right? And predominantly because we are a member association, to make sure that the schools have the dominant voice, or if not the dominant, close to voice at the table when discussing, what esports looks like as it moves forward. And from that, we saw that, okay, well, it seems that we have married interests, right? Where one is weaker, the other one stronger. We have these two different populations, which are both critical for the ecosystem that we have. If we brought together our efforts, could we do this better than each group individually can do? Is the sum now greater than its parts? And the answer, I think, over 2 years has been absolutely yes, right? It's been a resounding success. It's been growing by leaps and bounds. Every year is a monstrous amount of growth. We're officially licensed by every single publisher. We're the official leagues for a lot of our publisher partners. Tencent was the most recent one that we were running PUBG Mobile events. I think last weekend was our second iteration of that. And it's growing nonstop, but it's really representative of organic grassroots growth, but now with some strategic plans in place over that, guiding that growth. So that's historically how it came to BART, right? It came to being was just matching those interests. A lot of trust was involved, trust and verification, I think, amongst both parties, and I think we've gotten past that. But our teams work effectively as one across really any other department you can think of. And it continues the theme. I've been published on this many times, right? I think collegiate esports, it has to consolidate sooner rather than later for the space. That doesn't mean you can't have your own thing. That doesn't mean you can't have your own conference or region or standalone event. I think that's wonderful. More power to you. But just wondering how that fits within the whole ecosystem cohesively, that's always been my objective. And we've been seeing that, right? Like this year, I think NACE Star League, we've been approached by most collegiate organizations on how do they join NACE Star League, right? How do they merge with us, right? What does that even look like? And I think that speaks to the ground shifting a little bit to where Dan mentioned earlier, right? Providing member value. How do we support our schools? How do we support our students in a way that's sustainable, that grows and continues to provide value year over year? That's always been our focus, and I think we're now starting to see other people recognize that, yeah, simply put, in most cases, you can do more together.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you for that. And I didn't get to attend this year, but I heard a lot of great reports from friends that were at your big summit this year, saying how successful it was and how collaborative it felt. So congratulations on that. Okay,
I
let's
appreciate
move.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, let's move to Carolayne next. So Carolayne, in contrast, Mountain West, and Bob, this is going to be directed to you as well. Both Mountain West and ECC are both more regional conferences. Can you tell us a little bit about, how you serve your markets and what are the big advantages of a regional conference for these schools?
Yeah, sure. I mean, one of the advantages of being regional, one, we have like institutions that are members of our conference. They're also members of our athletic conference, and they compete against one another in traditional athletics as well as in esports. And so there's already rivalries that have developed, and that's one of the biggest things. You might have rivalries on the football field, and now we have rivalries in esports amongst our conference members. In the West, it's a lot of opportunity to compete against the schools on the West Coast, the schools in the Mountain West, and just the schools in the Western region. But primarily, the biggest thing is we have 12 Mountain West institutions who compete against each other, and they're bound not just by traditional athletics, but they're bound by esports, and there are certain academic programs that are alike. So it's something to be said to just have your group that you compete against and have the opportunity to qualify in many instances for competition nationally.
Yes, great. We've had Mountain West teams at CCCL and NACE. We all have a lot of familiar names that we're all working with. Bob, how about you? What would you like to add about regional conferences?
Yeah, in a similar vein, I think most of our schools are also participating in both NACE and the ECAC, and other organizations, and we don't have any kind of limitations on our schools. Right. We think more participation it could be valuable, and it's up to those schools to direct their own programs. I think what we did from the start was organize our esports league. We started with one game, and we're up to 6 now. But we started our esports with the intent that we would, similar to what Carolayne was saying, that we would run it similar to all our other sports. So we have, these are that win are getting the same kind of shirts, get the same kind of awards. We have honors at the end of each season. And so I think one of the positives that we found is that with a smaller league, there's more opportunity for recognition at times. Some local rivalries or regional rivalries have been created. I think the teams that win our conference are proud of being East Coast Conference champs and being recognized for that. And so that's kind of the niche that we've created, and we try to sell when schools contact us about joining us.
Thank you, Bob. I'll kind of throw this out for everyone. What are some of the assumptions about leagues and conferences that players or schools seem to have that you would like to shed some light on or clarify? Like, what are some of the main services that a conference or a league can provide, and how is it specifically different from traditional sports to esports? Does anybody want to touch on that?
Sure. If I could to start, and Bob just hit on it. I think when we all got started with this, several years ago, there was a little bit of some organizations were introducing exclusivity. You be with us, and all your esports comes here, and you can't be involved with anyone else. And we've touched on it already here. So many of our schools are involved with Michael and Carolayne and Robert, and it's kind of interesting that way. And I like that fact. They're finding what they need, and there's not this territorial part of it. And I don't know that everybody fully is aware of that, because we do these calls. Every week we have several calls with new schools that are interested, and many of them, that's news to them. But I think it's a cool aspect of what's going on in intercollegiate esports.
Yeah, I think agree with Dan, and similar to Bob. One of the things that people don't realize, at least from our conference perspective, is we run esports like we run any other championship. It's a competition. And so you have championship trophies, you have championship t-shirts and hats, and so on, just like any other championship. In addition, we also make sure that our student athletes who are participating are eligible to participate. And that's something that we did from the outset. And it wasn't necessarily, across the board, at least from what I understand nationally. So those are a couple of things that we do like traditional athletics, but I think a misconception is that esports is kind of out here on its own, and it really isn't. It's a competition. It might be different than what folks are accustomed to, but it's still a competition, and our schools and our institutions, our kids are really proud to represent their institutions and their conference.
Mm-hmm. Michael? Thank you, Carol.
Yeah, I'll add here. So Dan's right on the nose, right? There is so much intermingling of the institutions that are participating in each of our groups, the students, in fact, as well. An idea that's out there, which they never asked me, but who are your competitors? I'm like, I don't know. Haven't met a true competitor yet. Most groups we work with, we organize schedules with. It is not that there aren't, at least amongst the organizations here, there's not walls keeping anyone in or out for the most part, other than fitting with the existing schools in that space. So I think that's one typical misconception is, one wins if the other one loses. That's not necessarily the case. And esports is so young right now. If someone comes in with that mindset, they're gonna do more damage than good for the long run. And you're right. Yeah, I've always hated this phrase, and I did my best to kill it, and I lost. But the phrase, esports is the Wild West, right? I've hated that. The entire reason for NACE's existence is because the schools that had invested in the space realized, no, that's a terrible space to invest and build in. That's a terrible space to put your students in. We need to organize, and that's why those schools formed this association. The conferences being involved here on this call, especially, right, came in with that same mentality, right? We're not going to treat this any different. We're going to hold it to the same expectations. any one of our other sports would be under. And so I've always been a big proponent of, the Wild Wild West is dead. That may be on the periphery, but at least within our ecosystem, the space that we've built, it is treated exactly like you would for any other sports. Now, the rules might be a little bit different, the standards might be a little bit different, but the standards are there and the enforcement is there. We verify every single student who competes at any one of our schools. We check their academics every single semester. These are things that our schools came in expecting and demanding, and because we answered to the needs of our schools, that's something that we executed on years ago, and we still do to this day. But that story is common across everyone on this call. Like, there's not any difference there. So I just kind of wanted to put to rest this whole idea of the Wild Wild West still being predominant in this space. Maybe back in 2016, but it's been a while since then.
I will say though, Angela, that I think to some degree, this is still a bit of a confusing landscape for people that come out of the traditional sports arena, understanding how a team that plays in my league might also be in Dan's league and involved in NACE competitions also. And so I get a little surprised that when I do hear from schools that are saying, well, we're thinking about starting a program, because I just assume that most schools have talked about this for years already. So the explanation sometimes to folks that have just really a background in traditional sports, not esports, isn't always the easiest to have. The other part that I would say is that what we like to tell schools too at our league is that, again, we encourage participation. I think it's great. If schools have the resources to do it and enough bodies to do it, it's great. We say to people, listen, that means there's more opportunity for people at your school to join and participate. And maybe there's a team in the ECAC and another team in the ECC that are both playing the same game. And so that, to me, this is a real this esports is the opportunity is significant, I think, for schools for the reasons that schools are adding it, participation and enrollment and attention and all those kind of things.
Bob, that's a great
Bob,
yeah. Go ahead, Dan.
Bob, I'd just add that conferences and alignment in the area of traditional sports is getting increasingly confusing as each week goes by the way.
True. Good point. Yeah, good point.
Yes, as Carolayne knows that very well right now. But I wanted to touch on that just briefly. Like you said, Bob, it is very different and sometimes hard to understand the differences. But number one, how do you all feel about multiple rosters for different game titles? We encountered that this year where some schools would be sending multiple rosters to compete in our events. And do you see that as a trend that's going to grow? And also, what has your feedback been from your schools on esports and gaming in general as a recruiting tool for new students on campus? So we'll start with you, Michael.
So we addressed the issue about having multiple rosters in the same esport from the same institution a couple of years ago. The way we did that was by establishing a divisional structure. So first off, we separated varsity programs on one side and clubs on the other, creating two divisions for each. We have Varsity Plus, we have Varsity Premier, we have Open Plus, we have Open Premier, and so that's diverging clubs and varsity programs. Secondly, we developed Varsity Premier to be the traditional one team per esport per institution, right? That is what we call our premier level, our top level of competition is Varsity Premier. And so in that one, that division, you can only have one team representing a school in a singular esport. We don't allow for multiple rosters from the same institution competing there. In Varsity Plus, however, we took a very different approach, and we do allow multiple rosters from the same institution in the same esport. But what we do is, because we're basically creating this conference infrastructure that consists of our regular season. And we make sure, because we are power ranking schools to create a solid competitive experience, that the same roster or the roster from the same school, like they're not going to be in the same conference. So we're splitting them apart that way as well. And you can see that mirrored on the open side as well. So we went in intentionally and made sure that everyone's rosters are going to be split up, depending if it's Premier or Plus. They're going to be split up by their proficiency in the game, their ranks, or the performances in past seasons. And then we're going to also make sure that there is good diversity and that there's no instance, like in the old days of collegiate esports or esports generally speaking, where in a match you'll have a school play their other team, right? Like that doesn't happen in NACE Starling and hasn't happened for years. So that is how we took that approach. To answer the other part of your question, we understand that many institutions who have varsity esport programs, they started these programs first and foremost as a student retention and recruitment tool. So they are incentivized. Their goals are to create as big of rosters as possible because they want as many students involved as possible. But because the rosters for each individual esport are quite small, I'll pick on Rocket League and our friends over at Psyonix and Epic real quickly. But that's a roster size of 3, right? Maybe you have you probably do have an alternative, so 4 students in total. It's not unusual at all for a college or university to have 3, 4 different Rocket League teams because they're trying to hit those larger student numbers. And so they're creating a Team A, Team B, Team C, Team D. And that is why amongst many of the groups here, we see the same institution competing in, any combination of the esport orgs that are out there. But they're trying to find homes for all these teams. So all their students are active and they can continue to grow these programs. But so long as that goal is in there, the schools are incentivized to try to make these programs as big as possible, with any resource limitations that they may have constraining that. And we want to help support that, right? We're going to match the needs of our institutions. If we're being told that's critically important, we're going to build things to enable that. But at the end of the day, we're going to default to it always comes down to what the school wants to do. If they want to create a full academic year of competition, they can do that. That's why we created the semester model, where they would just sign up in both semesters and they now have a full academic year of competition, perhaps even for the same students. Or if they want to create an on-season and off-season dynamic, they can do that by just simply choosing the semester they'd like to compete. So it really, for us, it came down to building it correctly to enable schools to have choice.
Great.
I think I got all your questions. I'm sorry if I missed something there.
Anybody else? Dan, did you?
Yeah. So we did it a little bit differently. From the very start, we allowed schools to have as many teams per game as they wanted per title, and we have like NACE, we now have divisional structure where we have as many as 3 different divisions based upon competitive level. But even within that, if you have 2 or 3 teams that are good enough to play in the top tier division, you can play all 3 of them, and it's just a difference in philosophy and that we've gone with, and I think it enables schools to have bigger rosters, perhaps, and so we I think that leads us. We have, I think, 60 plus people or competitors per school of our member schools, and I think that's the reason why. But it's just a different approach. As to your second question, absolutely, schools are. I think that maybe some of them went into esports years ago thinking and buying off on there's going to be huge sponsorship money and all that, and while they may have been a little disappointed there that it takes a lot of effort to generate revenue. However, the enrollment part, absolutely, they have found that there's an enrollment relationship, and many of the schools that went in to boost their enrollment are finding that they have, and then they're doubling down on it really in terms of starting academic programming and even in many instances majors related to esports. And so I think they're having a lot of success of realizing a lot of success in those ways, in addition to all the competitive benefits and that you get with fielding intercollegiate teams of any kind. So I think they're very satisfied with the impact that it's having on enrollment.
I think the better programs do a better job recruiting, are committed to actively recruiting and not, not putting up flyers on bulletin boards and hoping they're going to be able to field a team, by kids that are just walking past that, the cafeteria. And so the programs that spend more time, and have brought in people as leaders on their teams to work to identify potential students will do better.
Yeah, I think one of the things from our perspective is that we have support from the top, so from our board of directors, and so that trickles down to our programs, and it certainly does help, as Dan mentioned, the recruiting aspect for the institution overall. And so that's been a big point of emphasis for our schools. As it relates to your roster question, historically, we've allowed one roster per institution per game. However, during COVID, when we were trying to keep all of our students connected, we allowed multiple rosters per game, and we did what we called a quarantine series because we felt like our students were not connecting to one another because no one was on campus. And I don't know, I think we ran it about 6 or 8 weeks in that spring of 2020. And that was the only time that we did. But the understanding is you have one roster per game per school for the Mountain West.
Thank you all. That's all very, very interesting. So we're going to see more game titles, more rosters, more teams joining different conferences. It's quite an interesting space we're looking at here. So let's start wrapping up just a little bit, but I'd like to go to each of you. Michael, we'll start with you. What are you most excited about this upcoming season with NACE? Do you have any news or exciting something new you're doing in the conference that you'd like to share?
Sure. Well, as I mentioned earlier, my title's a little bit different because my work is a little bit different. But and we've got some announcements coming out, but we have athletic conferences fully joining NACE, and we'll be competing as conferences under NACE Star League, the Star League's banner. And that's our evolutionary growth, right? Like I mentioned earlier, consolidation, bringing the space together, aligning interests, and leveraging resources to create a bigger win for everyone involved. This is the next evolutionary step. Whether it's a small step or large step, the time will tell. But we're excited to start actually onboarding full athletic conferences who will be competing as athletic conferences, but with the support and resources of the association behind it. So that's probably the biggest one. Or I literally was editing the announcement today, which is funny because my edits will always get edited by actual communications and marketing folk. So that's coming out here fairly soon. It should have been out earlier if we had managed to get everything squared away. But that's probably the biggest and most exciting thing that we're looking at here in the short term in terms of big news coming out from the association. As always, we're looking forward to reopening NACE Star League's advertising network once more. We were the first organization to actually start developing one centralized but nationally distributed advertising network on behalf of our schools. It's all opt-in, so schools choose to participate or they choose not to. But those who choose to participate, we're writing them checks. We're sending them revenue that's separate from the normal revenue streams that colleges and universities typically have available to them within the esports space. And it's doing well. Like last year, I think our mark was $2,500, which is strangely enough, like it just worked out math-wise to our membership dues every year. So the schools that participated, which we're essentially controlling and running for them, they're competing absolutely for free within NACE. Like everything's just a net win for them at that point, and we're looking forward to expanding that as well.
That's wonderful. Dan, what are you looking forward to this season?
I think years ago, when we started this, we thought that the in-person events would be much bigger than what they ended up being, and it ended up that the online aspect became much bigger, and especially during COVID. We did our GamerCon in Albany every year, but now we're getting much more involved in this ECAC Campus Series invitationals, where we're doing a lot more going out to campuses and having campuses host a collection of schools, and it's been a pretty cool thing for us. And now that we're national, we're doing it in different segments of the country, and we're looking forward to those events this year as well.
I love that, Dan, and I've got to go to several gamer cons myself, and I have been really, really impressed at the number of crowds that you draw for that, and the high level of production. Really, really great event, and I like that model that you're doing across the country. I think a lot of schools want that. Carolayne, what are you excited about this season?
The upcoming season, it feels more normal than the last several have felt. But we've had some preliminary discussions about another institution joining the Mountain West Esports team. So once we get down the line, hopefully we'll have an announcement of who else will be joining us to play the games that we play. So excited about that, as well as the upcoming season.
Great. Congratulations, Carolayne. Bob, how about you? What are you looking forward to?
For the last couple of years, we've been partnering with EsportsU to produce and stream our championship events, and we're expanding, as you know, Angela, we're expanding that relationship for the coming year, where EsportsU will also be helping us manage our league. And the reality for being a small conference running esports is that we want to do a better job. We want to have better services for the teams and the students that participate, and be more organized and really give them a good experience. And so we're excited about formally joining with EsportsU for this coming year to help us provide all those services. So I think it's going to be a major step forward for us.
Congrats.
We're excited about that too, Bob, and I know they've already had a lot of calls with your schools, and we're working on high-end graphics for you, and super excited. We also do a lot of Dan's broadcasts. We do all of Dan's broadcasts. Carolayne, we do some of yours too. So we're excited too about kicking off this season. I mean, we are just so happy to be part of this community and part of growing this space right now, which I feel is really in a more solid shape than pro esports are, or even amateur esports are right now. And due to the importance of esports and gaming across education and the impact that can make on the future workforce and leaders of tomorrow. So really privileged to be able to work in this space and know all of you, and I look forward to us all growing together and deepening our relationships this year. So let's close with one word from each of you. If you were to identify the most important metric to grow college esports, what would that word be over the next, several years coming up? We'll start with you, Michael. I know what your word's going to be.
Oh, I got plenty of words. You're making me pick one KPI? Oh my gosh.
Right.
If we're talking about student success, I'm gonna give you a curveball. How about that one? Because I think I know
Okay.
what my answer would have been. I'm gonna give you a curveball. I think graduation rates and employment rates within 6 months of graduation, I think that's gonna become critically important for all of us to pay very close attention to.
Wow, love that. Okay, great. Dan?
Well, it's hard to argue with that, by the way. But I think uh, I the roster size per school, I think is an important metric to see how engaged a school is and how a school is doing with their esports program, and so that's something we look at. It's why we want to, we've added our 17th title now, and that's always been very important to us.
Yeah, the diversity of the game, so important. Carolayne?
I would say the diversity of the teams. The more people that we can attract to play
Okay.
video games, to play at our schools, the more we're going to expand our teams. We know that, a lot of people play before they get to college, but women, for example, don't necessarily get on college esport teams. I would like to see more diversity, across our team rosters, and hopefully get more people who can play and feel comfortable in the space.
That's great. That's esports is a great equalizer for everybody. So I love that. Bob, how about you? What's
Yeah,
your one
once
magic?
again, I'm in line with a lot of the stuff that Carolayne says. I think that one of the big things, and maybe this, I'm not sure this is what you're looking for, but I think what's really important for college programs is to start building relationships in their communities,
Mm-hmm.
with high schools and youth programs,
Yeah.
and that's something we've tried to do within our conference with some partnerships we have in the New York metro area. I think that's going to be really valuable because it's going to lead to all this stuff that Dan talks about expanding programs. Same thing with Michael, that's going to move to students paying more attention to their academic and career goals coming out of these college programs. But the high school programs are growing quickly, and same thing with youth and community programs too. And so I think colleges have the ability to build those relationships that will help those programs grow, but also start
Mm-hmm.
building potential, student bases for their both academic and esports programs.
Agreed so much, Bob. And the panel right before this one was on selling local sponsorships for
Okay.
your esports program. So again, connecting with industry and businesses in your local community. There's a lot of schools that are getting local sponsorships for their esports teams. So if any of you want to go back and watch the panel that was before, we had some schools on there talking about how they're fundraising and getting scholarship support for their esports programs. So I don't see on here that there's any chat. I don't know if I was supposed to see chat or not, but anyway, I want to thank you all for joining us here today and sharing these insights. It's been very, very valuable for myself, and I know all the viewers watching. Again, just a pleasure to know you all and get to work with you all. There is a Discord session that starts in 15 minutes on the EsportsU Discord. So, Bob or Dan, Michael, Carolayne, if you have time to jump into that Discord, and it's an opportunity for our community to be able to connect with you directly and ask questions there. So, I'm sure Kyler will send you that information and how to get involved in that. But again, a big thank you to all of you, and I look forward to seeing you in person this year. So good luck to
Agreed.
everyone in your programs, and if we can be of service or just supporting you in any kind of way, please let us know.
Thank
Well,
you.
thanks for all you're
Thank
doing,
you.
Angela. It's great working with you.
Great job.
Thank you all as
Thank you.
well. All
All right,
righty.
good seeing you guys. Yep.